Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar will be covering P-card and T&E policy compliance. My name is Melanie, and I work in the marketing department at ACL. We're going to be getting started shortly here, but I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items first. We will be recording today's webinar and making it available to everyone on the line in a couple of days. We'll be together for about 45 minutes to an hour. We're going to try to respect your time and keep it to an hour, and we will save time at the end for a Q&A. So if you do have any questions at all throughout the presentation, just type them into the question section, and we'll answer them at the end of the session. And without further ado, I will pass it over to Phil Lim to get started with the webinar.
Awesome. Thanks, Melanie. And welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm Phil Lim, as Melanie mentioned. I work at ACL Services. And we really hate long introductions here. My name is Phil Lim. I've worked with the product team at ACL. I've got with me a couple of folks as well on the call. Shane, you want to introduce yourself as well?
My name is Shane Grimm. I am one of the product managers at ACL. I've been with ACL for a number of years, starting off with the training department and working through product design and now in product management. So that's me. And I am just going to quickly reset, and I'll be back in 1 second, Phil.
Awesome. Thanks, Shane. We hate long introductions. We've got a lot of content to cover today, so I'm just going to get right into it. We've got four components of today's session. The first component is going to be, first two components are going to be about case studies from our clients. We are lucky enough to have two panelists to join us today to explain a little bit about how they're utilizing ACL technology in their processes. So the first part of the session is going to be with Bon Secours Health Systems. They're using our technology to monitor their P-card system. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the Visa commercial format data that they're using. We're going to move on then from there to Equinix, who is using our technology for T&E expenses. And their system or technology for their expenses is Oracle iExpense. So I'm going to explain a few takeaways around how we access data from Oracle iExpense. And then we're going to move into a bit of a showcase where we're going to demonstrate some common tests, how we perform continuous monitoring in ACL Analytics, and Shane is going to take us through a bit of that, and then we're going to go into some of the resources and where to go from here. We'll show you some common tests, we'll show you some best practices, and hopefully this will be a fun-filled 1 hour for you today. So the first thing that we wanted to talk about today was, as I mentioned, a bit of a case study on Bon Secours Health System. And so they are using, as I mentioned, our technology for P-card. And I have with me actually today Cindy Rodas, the manager of Central AP. Cindy, do you want to say hi?
Hello.
Awesome. Thanks, Cindy. And you work for Bon Secours. You folks, you want to explain a little bit about what you folks do as a healthcare provider and where you're located, et cetera?
Sure. We have hospitals up and down the eastern seaboard. We're located in New York, in Kentucky, in South Carolina, in Florida. And we're a system of Catholic healthcare industry, I guess, with acute and non-acute facilities and a lot more physician partnerships as well these days.
Awesome. Awesome. And so when we were talking about your case, and actually I was on site at Bon Secours back in 2011, 2012 implementing your program, we were talking about the size and scale of your P-card program. And you had implemented the P-card program, and it's now at about $2 million of spend per month for about 850 P-cards. Do you want to explain a little bit about what your cardholders use their P-cards for and what their general use of the P-card program has been?
Sure. We've gone through and identified a lot more uses more recently, but we've always encouraged like subscriptions, memberships, any kind of employee like activity that's not a regular invoice, in order for the funds to be applied a little bit more directly. We also have identified Staples. We had a toner company we were using at one point. We were using our P-card for that as well. So we've identified several benefits, especially when it comes to rebates and
Awesome.
Using the card. Yep.
Awesome. And so when you first implemented your P-card program, it sounded like your senior leadership was concerned with people and cardholders using it for discretionary purchases, or you would see a large increase in non-controlled spend. And that's why you were seeking a system. Is that correct?
That is correct, as well as just being careful with one of our values is good stewardship. So we just wanted to make sure that nothing untoward was happening, that we were identifying things early enough, and having our senior leadership be comfortable with that.
Awesome. So I understand that you had a previous vendor that was doing your P-card monitoring, and they went defunct. And so you were looking for another solution. So just to have people have a bit of understanding of how you came across ACL, you actually had no idea about ACL, and neither you nor your director or the folks in finance had any idea about ACL until your director had a conversation with internal audit.
That is correct.
Yeah, and then you had discovered that the internal audit team had recommended ACL, and they already had our technology. Is that right?
That is correct. Yep.
And so you folks brought us in. You also evaluated some other vendors as well, but because you already had the technology, because the uptime was so quick, you decided to go with ACL. And so you implemented 11 data analytic tests, or audit rules as you called them, and it was back in 2012 was when we first implemented, so it was a while ago now.
Yep, that's correct.
Awesome. And so some of your key data sources and key vendors that you were using, Visa, Bank of America is your P-card vendor, is also their Works card program management, and you also have Lawson HR, which we bump data up against as well.
Correct.
Yeah, so I've got a bit of a solution diagram on the right here, and so we bring in all of that data from those three sources into our continuous monitoring scripts in ACL Analytics Exchange. We have the P-card HR data that we pull in, and then we generate some P-card exceptions, which your P-card administration team logs into the tool and reviews them, and then they request for more information?
Correct.
Okay, and so the cardholder gets an email in their system, and then they get notified to provide some additional background and all that.
Right. We have wording in our email that says, please provide a description and, if possible, a receipt. A lot of people do give us a receipt, which is great because then we can kind of review the purchases as well.
Awesome. And so, general feelings about how the system is working for you so far?
Great. We've actually identified a couple of things on our policy that were not included, that were not being followed strictly. So one of the things that we asked is that nobody perform split transactions, and we did notice that there were here and there a few people that were being told either by the local system admin or even just kind of like they figured it out on themselves on their own. Well, I can just split my transaction and have it go through. And we strongly discourage that just to try to keep control of, how much the people are spending. And we don't mind increasing the total dollars that they have on their card as long as it's for a legitimate business purpose and that they know that they can reach out to us. So I think it's helped us try to figure out where we need to communicate a little bit more and who we need to communicate with as well.
That's awesome. And I've gone on screen here the list of tests and audit rules that you've applied. You mentioned the single transaction, so the split transactions there, and some of the other tests here as well. I guess, did you have any other comments on? I guess you've got your even dollar transactions there. Is that catching any gift cards or things of that nature?
It is. It actually is a big one for us. We should not be using gift cards for like birthday rewards. We do allow them in certain cases. But even just like there's another one that's also called the restricted words, where we can see if people are going to the spa or people are going to get just gift cards for a certain reason. So we report that as if it's for employees as I think it's called imputed income. So it helps us manage that process a bit more.
Awesome. And I just flipped over to the impact slide a bit. You've made some policy changes as the result of some of the results that you found using the tool?
Well, we definitely identified some policy changes needed for the next iteration of updates that we have for the policy. But yes, it's helped us a lot. And it's helped us kind of reinforce again, hey, we're not supposed to be using this for birthday celebration type things as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I think you mentioned it just before that some of the local administrators were actually suggesting to the cardholders to split their transactions.
Yes.
Was that something that you had actually anticipated? I guess not, eh?
No, not at all, because our policy does state, please, don't split the transactions, request an increase if needed at the time. So that was kind of surprising to us that our own administrators were saying, no, go ahead, split it.
Great. And now internal audit actually uses the data as well. Before they go and audit a particular location, they'll review some of this data that they already have in the system.
Correct, as well as just reaching out to us for any additional information that we might want to share with them. So of the audits that we do, is there anything in particular that's caught our eye? Has this person had any flags on their card? So I think it helps us communicate a little bit more with them as well.
Awesome. And I think there were a couple of cases you mentioned that fraudulent activity on the card was actually raised before even the bank knew about it?
Yes. So when we send out audits, it's within, I believe it's within 48 hours of us receiving the information from the bank. So in some cases, Bank of America is still working through our fraudulent, or through their own fraud department, and we've already noticed something on the card that doesn't look right. The cardholder will let us know, and we can get back to Bank of America that much quicker.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yep.
And so a couple of the learnings that you've had, I guess when you first implemented it, you had some issues with the Bank of America data files not coming in the same format that they had provided the sample files for you for.
That's correct. So a couple of the lessons learned there, we assumed when we went live that the files that they had provided us would continue to be the same files along the way. What we found out later was when we were implementing, Bank of America was including the cardholder information, and they only did that as a one-time thing. So after we got started, we noticed that some of our information was not coming through with the cardholder names and the other information that we might need. So again, just working with ACL, working with Bank of America to find the best format to provide that and make sure that it was ongoing. Yep.
Awesome. So thanks, Cindy, for sharing your story with us. I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive on the Visa commercial format data that we've just mentioned around. A good segue for just mentioned around receiving from Bank of America and Visa. So important key to analyzing this data is that the Visa commercial format is a standard format for transferring procurement card data. It provides level 1, 2, and 3 data. What that means is that you can get information in the Visa commercial format all the way down to which merchant, at what time, what the MCC codes are for those transactions, even when you're dealing with things like airlines, what the destination was, or when you're dealing with hotels, how many hotel nights they stayed. And that's going to be important information as you're trying to do profiling and fraud-type analytics for your P-card program. Now, you want to work with your P-card vendor on determining your version because there are multiple versions of the Visa commercial format. The particular version that we had used at Bon Secours was Visa commercial format version 4, revision 2B, and that was the documentation. And they'll provide full PDF documentation on what the format is. The real challenge with the Visa commercial format data is that there are multiple record types in the same file. So you'll receive one file, and in that file, you're going to get things like the cardholder information. You're going to get account information like balances, limits, etc. And you're also going to get the transactional data. So all of that information is just in one file instead of in separate files. And you end up with 27 different record types. So you'll notice, and I know it's really small on the screen here, but that first column in that example picture of the data file on the right here has a number, and each number corresponds to a different record type, and whichever record type it is, whether it's a cardholder or transaction, you need to read that data in a different way. So for those of you on the line who use ACL Analytics, and for those who don't, it can be a bit of a complex process, but essentially, the import approach that we use with ACL Data Analytics is that we place all the Visa commercial format files in the same directory because you're going to get a different format file on a regular rolling basis. So as Cindy mentioned, they get the transactions within 48 hours. Once they're all in the same directory or folder, then ACL has a directory command to find all those files and then go into each file and split it up into the card count data, the cardholder data, the transaction data, the company data, organization data, etc. So depending on what that first column is, whether it's a 4 or a 5 or a 7, then it'll split out the different data into the different files. So this I know this is a bit of an interesting approach here, but that's how you would apply ACL Analytics to download and import the data from Visa commercial format. I'm going to talk a little bit more about these scripts towards the end of the session as we go into the resources. But before that, before I go into the next case, Cindy, thank you for sharing your story with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Great. On to the next case then is Equinix. Now, Equinix, if Bon Secours was doing P-Card and had implemented a couple of years ago and now quite mature, Equinix has just implemented their program. And with me today, I'm pleased to introduce Luana Anderson, who is the T&E Corporate Card Program Manager at Equinix. Luana?
Hi.
Awesome. So you're with Equinix, the world's largest IBX data center and co-location provider. So I think for the folks on this call, I think that what that means is that you folks do data centers?
Correct.
Awesome. And you're growing at a tremendous pace, as I understand it. You have 2,500 U.S. employees. Your total U.S. Spend in T&E was $7 million worth of air travel, which was up 50% from the previous year. Is that because of organic growth, or what's with all the travel?
It's organic growth, but we're also growing globally. So our employees are going to all of our global locations a lot.
Awesome. And there's lots of upgrades and new facilities and new capital projects to be built out. So that I guess that makes it all pretty complex, I would imagine. So
yes.
You folks had a problem. You had monthly T&E reporting. You were collecting data from Amex, Oracle iExpense. And then you were taking that data personally and taking Excel, VLOOKUPs, pivot tables, and you were building out some reports. So you want to tell me a little bit more about your process?
Yeah, my process was basically my goal was to take data from Oracle and data from Amex and combine them into a master file so that we got a good picture of our T&E spend. Because originally we were just pulling Amex data, but that didn't include all the actual hotels, all the actual cars, so we weren't getting a full picture of our spend. So they asked me to find a way to make it happen, and I came up with this master Excel file.
Great. And so this Excel file, it combines data from a couple of different sources, does that Excel magic, but it did take you still 50 hours of effort over 7 to 10 days to generate these results. And that's only for the U.S.
Yeah, it did because you're crunching a lot of numbers and you're moving data around. And, at the end of the day, we ended up with 21 different PowerPoint slides to get our point across because we were getting data by top spenders, top airline, top hotel, and it was just a matter of crunching all that data.
Right. And the director of finance, neither you nor the finance department knew about ACL until you had a chat with IA, so it's a very similar story with Bon Secours, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. We just happened to mention a meeting, the amount of time it was taking me to do these reports, and they go, well, why are you doing that? So they introduced us to ACL.
Awesome. And so when you were working with ACL, you had built out some analytics here. This is an interesting list of analytics that you've put together. Some of them are around profiling the data and just looking at top spenders, but some of them are more on policy, and some of them are even fraud. So any particular ones that you want to talk about here?
I think our big one was our out of policy. Being able to track it, see who was doing it. We were still being challenged with looking for repeat offenders, but by doing it, we were able to see who wasn't booking online, who was booking at hotels higher than 300 and they're not in a major city. Our big thing is expense reports that are submitted after 60 days. So we're able to approach these people, and say, what's going on? How can we help you get your expense reports in sooner? What is your challenge? So that was what these reports allowed us to do, is reach out to these employees and ask them, what what's going on that you need, that we can help you to make your travel more time efficient and within policy.
Awesome. And when you say out of policy ones, you have a couple here. You have one that's airfare out of policy, one that's hotel out of policy.
Yeah.
So airfare out of policy, is that around booking within 14 days, or is it,
No.
what type of policies are we talking about?
No, that is booking outside of our booking tool, Concur. Our policy is that anything over $200 is considered out of policy if you expense it through iExpense, through Oracle. There are always exceptions to the rule, which also helped us understand our booking tool better to find out what these exceptions were, why they couldn't book using the tool. So we're tracking that kind of information. That number went down drastically once we were able to start seeing the reasons. Hotel is simple. Anything over $300 is out of policy if you're in a state or if you're not in a major metropolitan area.
Right. And so just to take a step back a bit, you mentioned that there were a couple of reasons that you identified why people were booking airfare outside of Concur. Now, I could see one reason is that people want to get points on their card, but was there any other reason that you had identified?
No, the major reason is last-minute changes. They get to the airport, their flight's either canceled, and there's limitations as to when you can change your flight using an agent, so they'd have to book their travel at the counter. The other one would be that they just last-minute booking and they were not able to get onto the tool. A lot of their out of policy is actually seat upgrades for long-distance travel or change fees.
And has that had any impact on your policies or program administration?
Not for the airfare, but for the hotel. It made us reevaluate what our rate was, so we're going to do it more by region. You know, if you're in San Francisco or New York, you'll have this rate. If you're in some place like Seattle or someone not a larger metropolitan area, then we'll stick to the $300 rate. So that kind of made us reevaluate when we kept seeing people going over the rate consistently. So that made us reevaluate our policy, and we're going to make adjustments.
Yeah, because I think we even mentioned it during the phone call before this session, was that you can have the policy there, but if it's not reasonable, if people can't stick to a $300 per night in New York, and it's difficult to do that, then they're just going to ignore all of the policies because they figure that if they're not the policies are just there, right?
And we learned people didn't like seeing their name on the list. People would actually call us and say, how did my name get there? So people didn't like being shown up as being out of policy. So it was effective.
Great. Yeah, I think the shaming aspect of it is probably the most powerful aspect of all of this.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got on screen here a top destinations report. Do you want to talk about this?
This was one of my more challenging reports because, as you can see on the far left, it was my pivot table. So I took a report out of Amex, I put it into a pivot, but the only information there is the destination airport code, which you can see. Some of those I know what they are, some of them I'm not so sure who they are. So what I had to do is I took the pivot and I dumped it into the table in the bottom that would do a VLOOKUP and tell me what the airport destination city was. Then by that I would sort by the highest number of tickets and I would link into the tables above. So by going to ACL, it does everything for me. It looks up the airport, it looks up the airport city name, and then it dumps it into a table format that I just copy-paste in the table. So this report on the average took me about 30 minutes because there was always things that were missing, or I had to look up the city for the airport code because it wasn't in my list. So this would be a 30-minute report for me. And now it's more like 10 minutes, basically. Mostly just waiting for it to run.
Awesome. And so just to talk a little bit about the solution architecture here, it's similar to what we had at Bon Secours, but we have the added component of Results Manager. Now you have so we have Amex, Oracle iExpense, and Workday HR data coming into the continuous monitoring scripts that are used for trending and exceptions. But some of the exceptions are actually being routed to Results Manager now, which can be also triggered through questionnaires to employees. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. We've just started looking at that one, yes.
Awesome. And Shane's actually going to demonstrate how this process works in more detail later on, so I'm not going to spend too much more detail on this particular slide. But I think that's about it. Actually, we've got some still takeaways. But I did want to talk a little bit about the Oracle iExpense data that you folks are using. So for the folks that are on the line that use Oracle iExpense, this might be some interesting information for you. And you'll receive the slides after our session, so you don't have to be furiously jotting down notes. But these are some of the Oracle tables that we went after to pull the data down from Oracle iExpense directly. So the expense report lines, the expense report headers, the people table, the employee table, the AP cards table, user tables, and the GL code combinations table all were really important. And then we also had some key fields that we wanted to filter out or include that's also here as well. So we pull the data down directly from Oracle iExpense using ODBC, so that there's no need for you to make any sort of intervention like downloading reports or anything like that, right, Luana?
That's correct, yeah. All you have to do is, I don't have to do any of that anymore.
Great. So the effort the result was that, what used to take 7 to 10 days to generate in terms of duration now can be done in minutes. Is that accurate?
It's not, I wouldn't say minutes yet, but we've not run it in production, so give me a few more months.
Awesome. We will anticipate it being a few minutes,
okay.
But that'll free up your time to actually do the review and do the follow-up, right?
Exactly, which is what we're looking to do, is to be able to spend more time analyzing the data, being able to improve our travel program by analyzing the data, and we've not been able to do that now. It's just, let's get the numbers out there, and then we'll come back. We're never able to go back and look at it a second time.
Right, and now that they're all centralized, you have the ability to track repeat offenders, ask for justification, analyze T&E, like you mentioned, more effectively overall.
Correct, yes.
You've eliminated the manual steps that were prone to error. And the data is now combined effortlessly. You don't have to do any VLOOKUPs anymore.
That's very true. And I want to point out that something to keep in mind is that Amex uses one piece of employee ID, and iExpenses uses another different piece of employee ID. So it was the ability that when they created the script, that I don't have to combine them to get to one point. So because it's two different sources of data completely.
Awesome. And to do that mapping, was that something that we pulled out of Workday?
Yes, you pulled it out of Workday, and then you were able to map their Oracle ID to their employee ID. Because Amex uses their employee ID, Oracle uses their Oracle ID or the supplier number, and they were able to map the two together so that they now match.
Wow, that must have been not fun in Excel.
Oh, no, it wasn't. Time-consuming.
Okay. So that's all great. Just talk a little bit about what was learned and what's next. So you want to talk a little bit about what you meant by keeping the data pristine and QA testing and what's next?
Keeping the data pristine for me was, like I said, taking two pieces of data and making sure I was matching up to the correct employee for both pieces of data. It was a lot of visual. Okay, this one says this name, that name matches. Okay, we're good. There was a lot of visual looking for visual accuracy, which is, we all know, is not very efficient. So now we're going to go to the point where all I have to do is make sure that I have an employee name, an employee number, and then my 4 major fields. And as long as that's all clean, it goes in. So I believe that my quality assurance will be a lot better now. I won't be off by 1 or 2 here anymore. Even when they were running my test data from my actual data, I was finding where, oops, I assigned that to the wrong employee. So we were able to find that kind of stuff. And then the next will be the global launch. We are in the process of launching our TMC program globally. So we'll be able to pass this information on to all the other regions, and they can use the same tool. And then my goal is to get this into the P-card aspect. We have a P-card program here. It's not as major as Cindy's, but it's the beginning phases of a 3-year program. And again, that's also going global. So I hope to see where we can do a lot of auditing and look for those one-offs. So.
Awesome. Thanks. So we're going to move now over to the showcase. So first of all, thanks, Luana, for sharing your story. I think a lot of people really appreciate you coming on to speak with everyone today. And thanks again for sharing your story.
Thank you for the invite.
Awesome. So I'm going to move on now to talking a little bit about a showcase. So we're going to look at some common tests. I've got a couple of questions here that I do want to address from the audience around those tests, and then move into a continuous monitoring showcase where we're going to show you the actual user experience of some of the technology that we've talked about today in these two cases. So first of all, some common tests here. This is from our travel industry brand new T&E applications solution sheet application sheets. And you all are all going to receive a copy of this PDF after our session as well as the slides. So these will provide you information around the top tests for T&E and profiling the data, looking for policy violations, as well as for potential for fraud. And all of these come with examples as well. I have a question from Cynthia Bennett, who was asking about what we mean by split transactions. So that's a good question. Split transactions, let's say I have a card transaction limit of $1,000, and I need to make a purchase that's $1,500. What I might do to get around the $1,000 limit is ask my merchant to split my card transaction into two. So I would have two charges of $750 or one that's $850, or however I need to do, whatever I need to do to get under the $1,000 single transaction limit, and just have two transactions to the same vendor at the same time. So that is one way that people can get around these types of controls. And so how we would look for that in ACL would be that we would make sure, first of all, get rid of anything that is above the actual limit. So we will only look for things that are under a person's single transaction limit. Then we would summarize based off of the employee, off of the merchant, and off of the date, and subtotal the amount. If that amount ends up above the limit, then that means that, hey, we've got multiple transactions that have, while individually under the limit, have combined to being over the limit. So that would be our split transaction test. Any other good questions here? Shane, did you see any? Shane, are you back on the line? Shane, are you muted? Okay, well, I'll continue. We had a question here from Kate, which was, what is the minimum number of P cards that you would need to make this program cost-effective? That's a really interesting question. I'm going to probably save that for the Q&A session at the end. But let's see, T&E Analytics for SCPA considerations. So this is a good question from Steve Lindsay around which analytics would be used for SCPA considerations. I've often seen things, so FCPA violations are often foreign in nature, so a couple of good tests to do, of course, a keyword search for improper keyword terms is a very common one, like looking for consulting or other strange and vague terms. But some other ones that are not so obvious would be things like, well, the purchase was made in a particular country, but the transaction amount, the transaction currency was not of that typical country. So let's say you're in a country where the euro is more prevalent, but you're getting a transaction in U.S. dollars, or if you're elsewhere in Zimbabwe and you're getting transaction for dollars that are in rand, or something to that nature, where the currency doesn't match the location of the transaction is often a very good test as well. So Shane, are you able to come back on the line? No, he's having issues.
Oh, this is a test. Hey, Phil?
Oh, yeah, Shane, you're back.
Hey, there we go.
Oh, thank goodness.
You wouldn't believe the pain I've been going through over here, but I think everything's not great, but it's okay.
Okay, awesome. Great. So any other things that you wanted to mention around these common tests or and so forth?
No, I think you've done a great job. Just for the demonstration, what I was really hoping to do is go through ACL Analytics quickly, show how it was set up there. And work through the solution architecture, just to show how easy it is to take your tests that you have from ACL today and then automate those using ACL Analytics. But here, I just kind of keyword there. I wanted to show you. I won't be able to show you all of this just because of some of the technical details or difficulties that's going on right now. But one of the things, I'll just explain through this because I'm sure most of the people on the line have seen ACL Analytics before. Again, we're using the same scripting language you use through ACL Analytics through all of our different products here. So what I'd be doing is I'd be writing those scripts, creating an extra command on those scripts to export the results out to Results Manager. And I could run that as an ad hoc script on ACL Analytics. Or what I could do is I can move it to ACL Analytics Exchange, which is a machine that's always on, always running, always processing, and I can set it up with a schedule to import data whenever I want. Typically, I would do that during off-peak hours so that the IT department doesn't get upset with me. And then I would build in the analytics and start scheduling those. For ACL Analytics Exchange, there's some really nice features in there because you don't have to worry about learning how a complex Windows task scheduler works. We've built it to be very easy to use. And also it really caters to some of the features that our customers have really asked for. For example, I want to be able to schedule 15 different tests to all start at one time, and I want them to chain one after the other. So if one completes, then run the next one after another. So it really makes that automation very easy.
Awesome.
So
Shane,
yeah.
We've passed the ball over to Shane Grimm too. Is that going to work? Or?
That should be me. Let me just go out and share my screen, and this is just going to be a fun test on the fly here, as we always love doing in our presentations.
You were good, Shane.
All right, so I am on a completely separate machine. I had to go run upstairs, grab another machine, and turn this on. So it doesn't have ACL Analytics installed right now, but the nice thing is that all of the results that I've published to date are still available online for me, so I can continue from that point. So
awesome.
just a quick
So that means if your computer bombs, you're still good because your results are in the cloud.
Exactly, which we'll see in 1 second. I'm just going to switch over to my account, and we'll walk through this in a second. So hopefully, maybe just to bounce this off you quickly, Phil, is everything that I explained so far, does that seem to make sense, or do you think there's anything more we should talk about ACL Analytics or ACL Analytics Exchange?
I think we're good. We can show the Results Manager component.
Okay, perfect. So all of our customers have access to this, and I'm just going to throw a quick plug out for this one because I think this page is being underused, and there's a lot of great resources on there. I'm kind of going off topic, but I'll go really quick. On the left-hand side, we've got great help and training. We've got ACL Academy for our online learning courses with lots of great content. We've got Script Hub, which has a lot of great scripts, including some of the stuff that we see today. We'll have some information in there for that. So definitely search through our Script Hub afterwards for examples of some scripts. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus in on our Results Manager. And I've set up a various number of tests. You can see I've got 600 new transactions. I've been busy publishing stuff out to this one area. And so I have one we call it a collection that's specific for T&E testing. And within here, I've broken things down into two different categories, a merchant review and then a transaction review. This is really up to you how you want to organize things. This is just my one way of organizing. So within here, we'll see a number of different types of tests. Some of the tests we saw earlier on Phil's presentation. But I'm going to drill down into one of these. I'm going to drill down into the keyword search. Which we see right now, there's 223 transactions. So this means from my ACL script, I've gone out and I've done some specific testing where I'm searching for certain keywords, and I'm trying to find whether or not those keywords exist within the description field of these T&E transactions. And if they match, or if there's something like miscellaneous or cash or alcohol, then these are transactions I probably want to just have someone take a quick look at. And there's a number of different ways that we can review this. So I'm going to start off with this screen right now is the way that we'd actually go through and we'd investigate or remediate these individually. So for example, if I wanted to dig down into this one that's got alcohol, I can go through and just process that one single transaction. I can take a look at all the activity, review activity that's happened on this transaction so far. It just came in, so it doesn't have anything yet. I can review all the details. This is pretty much a repeat of what we see in the background on that entire record. Up in the top here, I get a chance to see what the status is, who published it, and who's assigned it right now. And some of this has been automated already, and I'll show you a little bit about how that workflow works in a second. But right now, if I wanted to take a look at this and I wanted to actually say that I need to say that this is under review, and I want to change this priority to high, and I'm going to save that. So now what's going to happen is that that transaction now has been updated. My actions on that transaction are now recorded in the system, and I can actually build a workflow around that process as well to start notifying other people on exactly what happened with that transaction. So let's just talk a little bit about how we can build that workflow. So I'm gonna back up a little bit here, and I'm gonna take a look at that keyword search again. Sorry, as I bounce around all over the place. So here's that same test that we have here. Oh, great! I didn't get a chance to turn all that off. And over on the right-hand side, we have this automate. And what we have to do this automation or to create these workflows is a thing called triggers. And I think these things are pretty cool because they're pretty straightforward kind of concept, but there's a lot of power behind these. And so in this one test, I have 4 different triggers that have been set up. And each triggers I've given hopefully a meaningful name. First one is I'm going to email the cardholder a survey, and I'll show you that in a second. If anything's marked as critical, I want to set up notifications. If anything has been sitting for X number of days, I can set up a little escalation. And each of these are pretty straightforward. Let me just show you how they work. So notify critical, the top part is the actual trigger, and I have a number of different options. In this case, I just said if the transaction has been marked by someone as critical, right away I want to let the senior manager know. I want to let Brian know that something's critical, so he can have some visibility on that. So that's one example. Another example I have here is if someone has been, or some of these transactions have been sitting in a certain state, in this case the status is new and it's been sitting idle for 7 days, I want to make sure that something's happened. So in this case, I'm going to notify Phil and just let him know that, hey Phil, this transaction, or if multiple transactions matched, these transactions have not been reviewed yet. The next one I'm going to show you is a survey. And this one's interesting because what it does is it allows me to actually send an online form out to people outside of this interface. It provides that end user just a simple interface where they can see the transaction and they have an option to add additional information to that record. So if something like this one transaction I saw earlier with a keyword of alcohol was in it, and I wanted to go out to the user and just ask them, can you explain why this has been flagged by our system as something that we want to investigate? Do you have any additional information you want to provide to the team reviewing this? Do you have any evidence you want to attach as either a PDF or a JPEG or any type of file attachment? And this information is automatically added to the system, so as soon as they respond, I can actually review that information. So the interesting concept with this is, as I get back to this, the actual data, let me go back and view the records, is that the original data that I see on the screen is something that was generated by the source system, generated through my ACL scripts. As I start to review this information, I add additional information to each record as of the status, the priority, and as we send out questionnaires or surveys out to users, their responses are also added to the same record. And the neat thing about that is that it means that I can do 2 things with all that information. One is I can enhance my automation. I can add additional triggers so that if, let's say, for example, a questionnaire comes back and the user said that that they didn't actually generate this transaction, they don't know what it is, I could generate a trigger that recognizes that and then performs a different action. Maybe right away I need to send Phil another message, say, hey Phil, we've gone out to one of these users, they don't recognize this transaction, we need to investigate this right away. So again, the triggers give a lot of flexibility with this. The other piece that information does allows us to actually investigate all of the transactions in a different way. We have this this feature here called View Interpretations. And I just have one set up here, just review all records. What this is, it's a different view of the same data. But the benefit of using this interface is it gives us some information or some different ways of summarizing the data. So for example, I could just do a quick pie chart based on the status of all the reviewers, and I can sum, let's say, sum the amount. And here we go. So now I can quickly see the number of transactions that are new, the number of ones that are open and under review. And I can double click on under review and quickly see those transactions. So the key concept here I want to really reinforce is the fact that this data is continually being improved as I start to investigate and start to collect more human interactions with each of these transactions, which gives me an option for further automation and as well as reporting. So Phil, I'll just stop there quickly and just see if you have any comments right now.
Yeah. So did you? I didn't see. Have you shown folks the? I've been busy answering questions here.
No.
Have you shown folks what the emails that that the cardholders receive as yet?
Not yet. So let's see if I can get into that. I am, of course, struggling with. Let's see. There, I'm going to have to get into my email here quickly. And notifications. Sorry, everyone. Okay. So here's an example of one of the emails that came in. Of course, if I had my other machine, this was all set up all nicely, but here's the email here. The first email notification I want to show you is just how we group everything together into a single email. So if I was a person responsible for helping to review these transactions, and I would be using the ACL GRC interface to do that, I would see an email like this. And
so these would be for the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
This would be for the P-card or T&E program administrators, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So they would get something here to say that either the system has received some new transactions for you to review, or someone's assigned them to you, and then it'll say there's a total of 50 records that you need to look at, and then there's just a web link that the user would click on, and in here they would go in here and they'd be able to see the transactions that they need to review. The other one here, let's see if I can get this one. Oh, and of course it's all lumped in here. Here we go. This is the second one type of email that I wanted to quickly show. And this is an email for the actual card holder. So this would be someone that's not going to be signing right into ACL GRC to manage all these exceptions. They're just going to be notified on the specific issues that you want them to look at. So in this case, here's a card holder comment for 2 records that have come up. And so it's just essentially what we're telling the end user is that it's been randomly selected, and we want to give you a chance to provide some additional feedback on these transactions.
So we're lying.
And so on the left-hand side, here's our, yeah, well, a little bit. Not quite random. You're right, not quite random. So on the left-hand side, here's all the information about that transaction that we're looking at. And then on the right-hand side, this is an option for the user to go through and say, yeah, it is my expense. And can you tell us any little more information about this? And they can respond however they want. They have a chance to upload any supporting documentation, and they can answer these questions. Now, neat thing about this is that you're probably looking at this going, you know what, we'd probably do ours slightly different, and this is completely customizable. You build the questions yourself. You have an option of all these different types of prompts for the end user. So here we go. Sorry, go on.
And just to give people an idea of how easy it is, well, Shane, you were still building this out like an hour before this. You didn't even have the questionnaire set up, a few hours before the session. It's
very simple to create, yeah, and I can actually go back and show very quickly where those are. So in here, let's just take a look at one of those questionnaires. And so the first one I have here is the cardholder comments. And so in here you have just the top description that the user will see. I don't have to worry about the actual how I'm going to format that information on the left, all the data. That's just done automatically. On this side, I can choose the order in what I want to prompt the user. I can add new questions. From here, I provide some description of what I'm asking, and then I have different types of responses, and then I can make it optional if I want. The important piece in here too is, remember how I said that all their responses are being added to the data? I need to, in a way, kind of visualize this differently, is that when they respond, it's going to be adding a new column to my data. And what do I want to call that column? So when I go through and perform some additional automation on this or reporting on this, I know what field this is being added to. So, yeah, that's
awesome.
Great.
Well, that's a good. Yeah, that's a good quick look at that. Why don't we close up the webinar with some questions and some? Oh, maybe we'll go through a couple of the resources and then we'll go to the questions.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
So let me stop sharing here. And yeah, we'll continue on to this. So let's see. So some of the resources here, I'm not sure, Phil, do you want to walk through this, or you want me to go through, or we can kind of go through together if you like?
Yeah, sure, I can take it. I mean, the T&E application sheets I've already mentioned, you're going to receive this as a takeaway. There are 47 profiling policy and potential for fraud analytics. Examples are provided. We can work with us. We've actually got more content behind the scenes on this. We've just kept it pretty high level, but we have considerations, the data elements required, common parameters, et cetera, that are also behind these. And then on to the Academy. This is part of all of our ACL customers receive access to this, where in there are procurement cards learning series, travel and entertainment learning series. So if you have new auditors or folks that haven't audited that area before, that it'll take you through actually using ACL Analytics and in-depth, hands-on activities with sample data. And upon completion, you'll get satisfaction that you're growing as a person. The next component, I think Shane already mentioned this, but Script Hub, there's way cool stuff in there. So we have a lot of data import scripts. So if you want to run your transactions against the U.S. government SAM list, which includes the OFAC list, EPLS list, LEIE list, and EPA list, you can do that. We have importing the Concur SAE scripts, et cetera, keyword searches, hundreds more. Go check it out. People are raving about it. It's pretty awesome. And then now to Q&A. So I've got a couple questions here that I've flagged. There was a question here from Rich Gilbert, was asking, where do we receive the transaction description? Is it included from data from the provider, or is it obtained after reviewing receipts? I mentioned quickly as I was going through the Visa commercial format data is that the transaction descriptions they can come from the cardholder. So the transaction descriptions for what the merchant is and where, for example, airfare went to and from, that comes from your card data as long as you've got level 3 data. The transaction description is often, though, entered in by the employee as part of either their iExpense process or Concur process or Works process, wherever they're managing their expense reports. So there's a couple of different places where that information is obtained from. So there was a question from Kate around the minimum number of P cards to make the program cost-effective. I'm not sure. We've provided the information here around how much spend is going through Cindy and Luana's scenarios, but I guess maybe I'll bounce the question to Cindy and Luana. Do any of you have any idea about whether this program would have been just as effective had you not had that amount of spend in your respective departments, if they're still here?
This is Luana. Unfortunately, I don't know what the spend was because it wasn't part of my budget. So I just know time-wise, it's going to be well worth whatever we're going to spend on it.
So that means you got the program for free then. It wasn't even out of your budget.
My department got it for free because the IA team took on the budget. So, but as far as time goes, I think it's invaluable.
Great.
I would echo Luann's sentiment as well. I think it definitely helped us as far as time is concerned, and it just wasn't something that I had another FTE to be doing all the time. So
awesome, and thanks for your input there. Yeah, I think that makes sense. There was a couple of folks who had questions around for the keyword search analytics is whether there's a standard list that we've utilized. We have a list of keywords that we typically use in our implementations, and we can share that as part of our takeaways that you'll receive after the session, as well as we'll be following up with every one of you that are on this call. Shane, were there any in there that you had found interesting as well?
Yeah, I guess one of the questions there from Marie is asking whether or not the notifications are available only to GRC users. And the answer there is for the surveys, no, you can actually send those notifications out to anyone. In that example I had, each transaction, each cardholder in the source data had their email address, and so the system uses that email address from the data table to send those notifications out.
Awesome. And I have a question here on, is it possible to implement both P-Card and T&E card into ACL tool and monitor to detect potential duplicate payments for the same user from both areas? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. In fact, that would be a fantastic use for ACL Analytics. I have other organizations that have implemented both programs, and bumping the transaction data between the two of them is certainly a worthwhile exercise and quite simple to do once you have all of the data in one place.
There's another question there from Sachiko. He's asking whether or not the results manager is separate from ACL Analytics Exchange and ACL Analytics, and the answer is yes. So in my scenario, I was using ACL Analytics Exchange to populate the results manager. You can also push results from ACL Analytics, or if you want to, you can actually just create a CSV file, open up ACL Results Manager, and then upload that data directly into there. So it is a separate product or a separate solution, but multiple ways of getting data in there.
We have a lot of questions here. We're probably going to have to. I'm going to take one more question, and I'm going to actually answer it right now because I think it's going to require Luana's input. But after that, we'll probably have to follow up with folks after the call to get through the rest of the questions. The question, I've got a couple of questions from folks who are asking about what are the common QA that folks have done around making sure that their Oracle iExpense data is complete. Like making sure that all of the data that we're receiving in ACL is accurate and complete before doing the testing. Luana, do you want to talk a little bit more about how you performed the QA?
Yeah, what we did is we pulled what we call an invoice register based on the based on the accounting date. So for July, I pulled all expense reports that were actually imported into payables for payment. And then we would run the analytics for iExpense, and we would see how close we were, and we were within $100 difference, which is usually just a timing as to maybe it got approved on the 31st, it just didn't get imported in on the 31st. So the range was anywhere from $100 to $500 difference, and so to me that was an acceptable variance. So we spent a lot of time. What fields are we going to pull, to get the right amount of data?
Awesome. And I'd love to state, okay, there's a lot of really good questions, actually, and I just want to be cognizant of everyone's time, including our panelists who have taken the time out of their day to not only join us today, but do the preparation for us. Again, a big thank you to Cindy and Luana for joining us. Certainly hugely much more valuable of a session with you than without you. And again, thanks to Shane as well for helping out with the demo here as well today. Thanks to everyone else for joining the session today. I'm going to pass it back over to Melanie for any closing things that she wants to say, unless she doesn't, and then we'll sign off from here.
Thanks, Phil. I think we have everything covered. As Phil mentioned, there are a lot of great questions coming in, which we unfortunately don't have time for, but we will certainly follow up with everyone offline. Thanks, everyone, for your time today, and hopefully you found the presentation valuable, and hopefully you'll be able to join us next time.